She had served tea to half of Seoul, and not one of them stood up when the first blow landed. That is the part nobody believed when the footage spread. A woman on the polished floor of the most expensive tower in the city, a thin line of blood at the corner of her mouth, and a room full of powerful people watching like it was theater. Her name was Zola. She was 51 years old. She had built her whole life from nothing, and in that moment, on her knees on cold marble, she was completely alone. Nobody in that room knew what I am about to tell you. They saw an old woman they thought was nothing. They had no idea they were looking at the most protected person in the entire city. They were about to find out, and the finding out would end careers, break alliances, and turn the whole balance of power in Seoul upside down in less than 60 seconds. The man walking toward her through that frozen crowd was about to change everything you think you know about power, about loyalty, and about the kind of debt that can never be repaid with money. But to understand why the most feared man in Seoul was about to kneel beside her, you have to go back. Back before the tower, back before the cameras, back to a small tea house on a narrow street, and a promise made 15 years earlier that everyone, including Zola, had decided was a lie. Let me tell you how it really happened. Zola ran a tea house tucked beneath a glass tower in one of the most expensive districts in Seoul. It was small and warm and a little crooked, with mismatched cups and a window that fogged up in winter. She had come to this country with 2 suitcases and no plan, an immigrant woman who spoke softly and worked until her hands ached. She turned no one away. If you were hungry and you had no money, she fed you anyway and told you to pay her back by being kind to someone else. There was an old man on her street, a retired tailor with no family left, who came in every morning for 15 years and never once paid. Zola served him like he was the richest customer she had. One winter he got sick, and she closed the shop for 2 days to sit with him in the hospital, because no one else would. When he recovered, he told everyone on the street the same thing. "That woman," he said, "is the only family I have left." The whole street knew her, the whole street loved her, and the whole street was about to watch her get crushed. Because the land her tea house sat on had become valuable, very valuable. A rising power figure named Ren wanted the entire block for a tower expansion, and Ren was not a man who liked the word no. He was obsessed with image, with optics, with being seen as untouchable. He sent his polished partner, a woman named Yuna, to handle the small problem of the stubborn tea house owner. Yuna arrived in heels that cost more than Zola made in a month. She smiled the way sharp people smile, all teeth and no warmth, and she slid a folder across the little wooden table. "Sell," she said. "Take the money, disappear quietly. Everyone wins." Zola poured her a cup of tea she did not ask for, looked at her with calm, steady eyes, and said, "No." That was the moment Ren decided to make an example of her. Now here is the first thing you need to understand about how men like Ren operate. They do not start with violence. They start with your reputation. Within days, strange posts began appearing online. Fictional headlines, a blurry photo of Zola with words underneath calling her a squatter, a fraud, a woman living on stolen land. Edited clips of the street made her look aggressive. The story spread the way ugly stories always spread, faster than the truth, and people who had never met her began to whisper. She watched her own name turn into something dirty on a screen, and she did not understand how a person could be erased so quickly by strangers who knew nothing. By the way, if you are watching this from outside Korea, from London, from New York, from anywhere, drop the name of your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story is traveling, because what happens to Zola happens to good people everywhere. The pressure grew. Dark-suited staff began standing outside her door, saying nothing, just watching. Sealed eviction documents appeared on official-looking paper. A man in an expensive coat told her she had 30 days, then 20, then 10. Her regulars stopped coming. not because they stopped loving her, but because they were afraid of the men outside. One evening, she stood alone in the empty shop and did something she had not done in years. She let herself be afraid, not of losing the building, of losing the one thing that building held. Because the tea house was not just a business. It was the last room on earth that still held her biggest secret. And if they tore it down, they might tear that secret out with it. Through all of it, Zola kept that secret buried so deep, she had almost convinced herself it was not real. 15 years earlier, in a much poorer district, before any of this, she had run a different tea house, smaller, colder. And one freezing winter night, a boy had collapsed in her doorway. A runaway, maybe 16, starving, filthy, with eyes that had already seen too much. The streets had marked him as theirs. He was the kind of boy the city throws away. Zola did not throw him away. She pulled him inside. She fed him. She hid him in her back room for 3 winters. She taught him to read. Not just words, but contracts, numbers, the way powerful people hide cruelty inside polite paper. She told him he did not have to become what the streets wanted him to become. She told him he was worth something. His name was Tay, but it was not a smooth thing saving that boy. There was one night in the second winter when the men he owed money to came looking for him on the street outside. Tay stood at the back door with his coat already on, ready to go back to them, ready to become the thing that wanted him, because he believed he was already too far gone to be saved. He told Zola it was easier this way, that people like him did not get tea houses and warm rooms, that the streets always win in the end. And Zola did not beg him to stay. She did something harder. She took his cold hands in hers, the same way she would take them 15 years later on a marble floor, and she said, "I do not care what the streets think you are. I know what you are. You are mine now. And the day you forget that is the day you let them win." He took off his coat. He stayed. And something in him never went back to the street again. And then one night, he was gone anyway. He left a note that said only this: "One day, I will make sure no one ever raises a hand to you again." She read it, folded it, and put it in a drawer, because she had learned long ago that boys who leave do not come back, and promises like that are how the heart breaks itself. She thought he was dead. For 15 years, she thought he was dead. She was wrong. Now, while Zola was drowning in Ren's pressure campaign, a different man walked into her tea house. His name was Suho. He was tall, quiet, and watchful, and he had been sent by a powerful business family to assess the contested block. He meant to stay 10 minutes. He stayed 2 hours. He did not know why. Maybe it was the way she set a cup in front of him without being asked. Maybe it was the way she treated a stranger like family. Maybe it was that she looked exhausted and frightened, and still found the strength to ask if he had eaten. Suho had spent his whole adult life around cold, calculating people, and Zola was the warmest thing he had ever stood near. He came back the next day, and the next. He started noticing the men outside. He started, quietly, without telling her, making them go away. A word here, a phone call there. He had power he never explained, and he used it to shield a woman who did not know she was being shielded. Something grew between them in those long, slow afternoons. Not loud, not dramatic. Just 2 careful people circling something neither of them said out loud. One afternoon, she caught him fixing the crooked leg of a table that had wobbled for years. He did not announce it, he just did it, quietly, while she was not looking. And when she found it steady, she understood that this was a man who repaired things instead of taking them. She asked him why he kept coming back to a tea house under threat, a place with no future. He looked at her for a long moment and said, "Because it is the only place I have ever walked into where I did not have to be careful." That was the closest either of them came to saying the truth out loud for a long time. She started saving him the seat by the window without thinking about it. He started arriving at the same hour every day without planning it. Two careful people, building a habit out of each other, neither one willing to call it what it was. One evening it rained hard, and they stood under the little awning watching the water come down, and Suho almost told her everything. Who he was, who he answered to, how he felt. He opened his mouth and then he closed it because he knew that the truth would change the way she looked at him, and he was not ready to lose that look. That hesitation would cost them both. Because the war Ren was waging had not finished. It was about to reach its worst point. Ren was a man who needed the public win. The smear was not enough. The eviction was not enough. He wanted to break Zola in front of an audience, wanted footage of the stubborn woman finally on her knees, because he believed that fear is the only real currency. So he arranged a press event in the tower lobby, the same tower that loomed over her tea house, and he had his people make sure Zola would be there. They told her it was a final negotiation, a chance to settle. She went because she still believed, foolishly, beautifully, that reasonable people could be reasoned with. She walked into a marble lobby full of cameras and cold faces, wearing a simple dress and her dignity, and she had no idea she was walking into a trap. Ren let her get to the center of the room. Then he gave a small nod. His dark-suited staff closed around her like a wall. Voices rose. Someone shoved a microphone in her face and asked about the fraud, the stolen land, the lies. She tried to answer with the truth, and the truth was boring next to the spectacle, so they twisted it. A man grabbed her arm. She pulled back. And then, in front of every camera in that room, one of them struck her, and Zola went down onto the cold marble floor. The room went silent, the kind of silence that has a sound to it. She knelt there, blood at her lip, and she thought, this is how it ends. Quietly, publicly, alone. And then she heard footsteps, slow, unhurried. The only movement in a frozen room. The crowd that had been so loud a moment ago parted without a word, pressing back against the walls, lowering their eyes. Even Ren, even arrogant, untouchable Ren, went pale, because he recognized the man cutting through the crowd, and everyone in that lobby was suddenly more afraid than they had ever been in their lives. He was the silent power behind half the alliances in the city. The name people whispered and never said too loudly. A man who could end a family's fortune with one phone call. He had been in that building the whole time, in a private floor above, and someone had run to tell him what was happening in the lobby. He crossed the marble. He looked down at the woman on the floor, at the blood, at the dress, at the face he had not seen in 15 years. And the most feared man in Seoul lowered himself onto one knee beside her, took her trembling hand in both of his, and in a voice that cracked the silence wide open, he said one word. Mother. You could hear the breath leave the room. Not a single person had ever heard that man use a soft word in his life. People had built entire careers on staying out of his sight, and here he was, on his knees on cold marble, holding the hand of a beaten tea house owner and calling her the one name that meant he would tear the world apart for her. The boy from the back room had come back. Tae was alive, and he had become the most dangerous man in the city. Let that land for a second. The starving runaway she had saved, the boy she had hidden and fed and taught to read, had clawed his way to the very top of the world that was now trying to destroy her. And Ren, in his hunger for a public win, had just beaten the one person on earth that Tae had sworn to protect since he was 16 years old. The power in that room did not shift. It inverted. Completely. in a single word. Here is where I have to ask you something, because I have been turning it over in my own head while telling you this. When Tae knelt down and called her mother, was that love, or was that a debt he could never stop paying? Is there even a difference? Tell me honestly in the comments what you think, because the rest of this story lives in that exact question, and I genuinely want to know which side you land on. Tae helped her up gently, like she was made of glass. He took off his own coat and put it around her shoulders. Then he turned to the room, and his face changed into something cold enough to freeze the cameras. He did not shout. Men like Tae do not need to. He looked at Ren and he said, "You put your hands on my mother." And every person in that lobby understood that something irreversible had just happened. In the days that followed, it looked like Zola had been lifted out of danger entirely. Tae moved like a storm. The eviction documents evaporated. The smear campaign was exposed, piece by piece, as fabricated, with Yuna's fingerprints all over it. Ren was humiliated in the same public way he had tried to humiliate Zola. For the first time in 15 years, Zola had a son with an empire, and a man who was falling in love with her, and it seemed like the nightmare was finally over. It was not over. It was just changing shape. Because Tae's love was total, and total love can become its own kind of cage. He could not let it go. The image of his mother on the floor played behind his eyes every hour. He wanted war. Open war on Ren and everyone connected to him, the kind of war that would pull the whole city into blood and pull Zola permanently back into the world she had spent 15 years escaping. He started talking about moving her into the tower, surrounding her with staff, controlling who she saw and where she went, all of it wrapped in the soft word safety. He wanted to lock her in gold and call it protection. She tried to tell him she did not need the tower. He did not hear it as a refusal. He heard it as a woman being too humble to ask for what she deserved. Every time she said she was fine, he added another guard. Every time she said she wanted her freedom, he heard danger and tightened his grip. His love had become a wall, and the more she pushed against it, the higher he built it. He was not trying to trap her. That was the worst part. He genuinely believed a cage was the only way to keep her safe. And there was a sharper problem. Suho. Tae found out that one of his rivals had a man circling his mother, and when he learned Suho answered to a competing house, his face went still in a way that frightened even his own people. In Tae's world, the woman he called mother could not love a man from the other side. It was not allowed. It would never be allowed. The very power that protected Zola had just made her love impossible. Zola felt the walls closing in from a new direction. She had escaped one cage, only to be lovingly locked inside another. And then the betrayal arrived, and it came from the last place she expected. There was a man inside Tae's organization named Jin. Jin controlled the surveillance, the footage, the sealed files, the digital evidence that the whole operation ran on. He was quiet and careful, and one night he came to Zola alone, looking like a man carrying something heavy. Jin had a reason for coming, and it was personal. Years ago, when he was nobody, Tae had spared his life over a mistake that should have ended it. Jin had asked him why, and Tae had said only this: "Someone once gave me a second chance when I did not deserve one. I am paying it forward." Jin never knew who that someone was. Now, standing in a small tea house in front of a kind woman with a bruise on her face, he finally understood. He owed his life to a debt that traced all the way back to her. And he was not going to let that debt be repaid with betrayal. He told her that Ren had not acted on his own. Ren should never have known about her land, or about her past, or about her connection to Tae. Someone had fed him all of it. Someone on the inside. Jin showed her sealed footage, a private meeting, and the person sitting across from Ren's people, handing over everything, was one of Tae's most trusted advisors. A man Tae had relied on for years. The advisor had been afraid that the woman from Tae's past would soften him, make him sentimental, make him weak, and threaten the money the whole machine was built on. So he had tried to make the problem disappear before Tae ever found out she still existed. The plan had backfired in the most spectacular way, but the betrayal was real, and it was intimate, and it lived inside the family. Think about how cold that is for a second. This man sat at Tae's table. He ate with him. He called him brother. And the whole time he was selling out the one woman Tae would die for because he was afraid that love was bad for business. If this story is getting under your skin the way it got under mine, send it to one person who needs to be reminded that the people closest to us are sometimes the ones we should watch the hardest. Some betrayals do not come from your enemies. They come from the chair right next to yours. Zola sat with that knowledge and understood something cold. The danger was not just outside the walls, it was inside them too. But Ren was not finished. Cornered, exposed, humiliated, he reached for the one weapon that could still destroy everything. He had dug up the full truth of Zola's hidden past, and now he played it. He came to her quietly, away from Tae, and he laid it out. He knew that the feared Tae, the man who terrified the whole city, had once been a starving, abandoned boy raised in a back room by a poor immigrant woman. In their world, that origin was not a sweet story. It was a fatal weakness. A man built on fear cannot have a soft beginning, because the moment people see the frightened child, the fear breaks. And when the fear breaks, the alliances break. And when the alliances break, people die. Ren gave her a choice. Disappear quietly, let him keep the land, walk away forever, and the secret stays buried. Or stay and watch him release the story. Watch Tae's authority shatter. Watch the war start. Watch the son she loved lose everything he had built and maybe his life along with it. It was a perfect trap. Either she lost herself or she lost her son. There was no door that did not cost her everything. And he gave her something worse than a deadline. He gave her a number. 48 hours. In 48 hours, he told her, the story goes out to every outlet in the city unless she vanishes. He even showed her the message, already written, already loaded, his thumb resting over the button. All it would take was one press. Then he stood, buttoned his coat, and left her sitting alone with a clock she could hear ticking in her own chest. So here we are, at the edge of it. Zola, a tea house owner, 51 years old, cornered by a powerful man holding the one secret that could burn down the only family she had left, with 48 hours on the clock. Before I tell you what she did, I want you to guess. Stop right here and tell me in the comments. Does she run to protect Tae, or does she stay and find another way? What would you do if the only way to save your child was to erase yourself? Put your prediction down now, because what she actually did, almost nobody sees coming. Zola refused both cages. She would not run, and she would not let Tae burn the city down for her. She had spent 15 years being small to stay safe, and she was done being small. Remember, this was the woman who had taught a frightened street boy to read contracts, who had shown him how powerful people hide cruelty inside polite paper. She had the sharpest mind in the room, and she had been hiding it her whole life. Now she turned that mind on Ren's own weapon and pointed it back at him. She understood something Ren did not. A secret is only a weapon as long as it stays a secret. The whole power of his threat lived in the word release. He thought he was holding a bomb, but a bomb only works if you are the one who gets to set it off. Take that away from him, and all he was holding was a story. And a story belongs to whoever tells it first. Ren's plan depended on controlling the story. So Zola took the story away from him. But it was not simple. The clock was running. If Ren saw what she was doing, he would press that button early out of spite. So she worked quietly through the night, the way she had once taught a boy to work quietly. She reached out to the one regular she trusted, the old tailor's nephew who ran a small, honest news channel. And she told him she wanted to tell her own story before anyone told it for her. She had one shot. If word reached Ren too soon, it was over. Before he could leak a single twisted word, she went public herself, on her own terms, in her own voice. She told the truth, the whole true thing, plainly and without shame. She told the city that the most powerful man in Seoul had once been a hungry, abandoned child, that a poor immigrant woman with a small tea house had taken him in, fed him, hidden him, and asked for nothing in return, that she had loved him like a son when the world had thrown him away. And here is what Ren never understood, because men like Ren cannot understand it. The story did not weaken Tae. It made him untouchable in a way money could never buy. The whole city, the same city that feared him, suddenly saw the human being underneath the fear. They saw a man who had been a starving boy and had survived. They saw the woman who saved him. And instead of breaking, the legend deepened. You cannot blackmail a man with a truth he is no longer ashamed of. In the same hour that Zola took back her own story, Jin made his move. He released the sealed footage. 2 pieces of evidence dropped at once. The first showed Ren orchestrating the staged beating in the lobby, the nod, the closing wall of men, the whole ugly choreography. The second showed the inside betrayer handing Zola's secrets to Ren's people. Ren's careful image, the only thing he had ever truly cared about, collapsed in an afternoon. His alliances, which had only ever been built on the appearance of strength, scattered the moment the documentation went out. Because no one stays loyal to a man caught on camera beating a beloved woman for sport. The betrayer inside Tae's circle was exposed in front of everyone. There was no shouting. Tae simply looked at the man he had trusted for years, the man who had eaten at his table and called him brother. And the man understood that he no longer existed in Tae's world. He was cast out, stripped of everything, left with nothing but the knowledge of what his fear had cost him. Now I want to know where you stand on this one, because it split the room when it happened. The advisor said he did it to protect the organization, to keep everyone safe and profitable. Does that explain anything? Or is a betrayal no matter the reason? Tell me in the comments. Was he a traitor? Or was he just a coward who told himself a story? I read every answer. And Yuna, polished, sharp Yuna, watched Ren's empire crumble and made the only smart choice left. Abandoned by the man she had served, she came forward quietly and confirmed that the entire smear campaign had been manufactured from the start. She traded the truth for her own survival, and in doing so, she nailed the lid shut on Ren completely. It was over. Not with a war, not with blood, with documentation, with truth, with a woman who refused to be either a victim or a prisoner. But the most important moment was still coming, and it was the quietest one of all. Tae came to Zola after it ended. He was ready to rebuild her whole life the way he wanted it. The tower apartment, the staff, the protection, the cage made of love. He laid it all out, the way a son lays a gift at his mother's feet, certain it is what she needs. And Zola, gently, took his hands the way she had taken them in that cold back room 15 years ago. And she told him no. She reminded him of that night. The night he stood at the back door in his coat, ready to go back to the streets. And she had told him he was hers, and the day he forgot that was the day they won. She looked at him now, the most feared man in the city, and she said, "You remembered everything I taught you except the most important part. I never once put you in a cage to keep you safe. I set you free, and I trusted you to come back. And you did. So do not do to me the one thing I never did to you. She told him she did not want the tower. She did not want the guards. She did not want to be kept safe by being kept small. She wanted her tea house. She wanted her crooked little window and her mismatched cups. She wanted her freedom, the thing she had crossed an ocean and survived 15 hard years to keep. And she told him that if he truly loved her, the way a son loves a mother, then he would not cage her. He would let her stay free. It was the hardest thing she ever asked of him, because everything in Tae screamed to protect her by controlling her. But he looked at the woman who had taught him to read, who had taught him he was worth something. And for the first time in his life, the most feared man in Seoul chose to loosen his grip instead of tightening it. He let her go. Not away from him, just free. And then there was Suho. Zola had spent so long believing she did not deserve good things that she had nearly let her own happiness slip away in silence. Suho had loved her quietly through all of it, had protected her before he even knew her name was worth protecting. He came from a rival house. By every rule of Tae's world, he was forbidden. And Zola, who had just refused 2 cages, was not about to walk into a third one built out of other people's rules. She chose him. Openly, without apology. She told Tae plainly that she loved this man, and that she was going to keep loving him, and that this was not a request for permission. Tae looked at Suho for a long, dangerous moment. The whole city would have understood if he had crushed the man on principle. And Suho did not look away. He did not bow. He met the most feared man in Seoul eye to eye and said only this: "I did not protect her because of who you are. I protected her before I knew you existed. I would do it again tomorrow if you ordered me never to." That was the answer that changed everything, because it was the one thing Tae respected above all else. A man who would protect her with nothing to gain. Instead of crushing him, slowly, Tae extended his hand. He gave them his blessing rather than his permission, which is a far rarer and far greater thing. He chose his mother's happiness over his world's rules. And in doing so, he finally became something more than the fear he commanded. He became her son in full. The tea house reopened, the regulars came back, and then more came, drawn by the story of the woman who had stared down an empire and won, without raising her voice. The little crooked place that had almost been crushed under a tower became the warmest room in the city. The old tailor came back too, slower now, and took his usual seat by the door and never paid, and Zola served him like he was the richest customer she had. The street that had been afraid to come near her now lined up at her door, and the tower that had once loomed over her like a threat now looked, somehow, smaller. Because everyone in the city finally understood that the most powerful thing on that block had never been the glass and steel above. It had always been the small, warm room below, and the woman who ran it. And every Sunday morning, when the light comes in soft through that fogged-up window, there is one seat by the glass that stays reserved. Nobody else sits in it. The regulars know not to. Because every Sunday, without fail, the most feared man in Seoul walks in quietly, sits down in that chair, and lets an old immigrant woman pour him a cup of tea and ask if he has eaten. No guards, no fear. Just a son, and the mother who saved him, and the simple miracle of a kindness that came all the way back around. That is the whole story. The woman they tried to erase became the one name the city could not stop saying. The boy who was thrown away came back to kneel at her feet. And the truth they tried to use as a weapon turned out to be the strongest shield of all. If this story moved you even a little, do me one small favor. Subscribe to the channel and leave a single word in the comments, the word mother, just so I know you stayed all the way to the end with Zola. I read every one of them, and your word tells me which story to bring you next. Thank you for staying. I will see you in the next one.